Welcome to Train Signal. This is the Shared Access to Resources lesson in the Windows 7 Administration Training course. We'll start this lesson with an overview on what resource sharing means for GlobalMantic. We'll then talk about basic and advanced sharing available in Windows 7. Next, we'll make sure you understand share versus NTFS permissions and what happens when they're combined. We'll move on to offline folder caching and what it has to do with file sharing. And then we'll move on to sharing printers and managing print queues in Windows 7. Next, we'll talk about the new feature in Windows 7 called Libraries. And we'll wrap up with a short discussion on a home-based feature called Home Group. Information technology advancements have created a collaboration revolution, and GlobalMantic wants to make sure that they capitalize on this revolution. Collaboration is enabled through resource sharing, that is, sharing resources such as files, folders, and printers. These resources are commonly shared at GlobalMantic, but not all users need access to all shared resources. For example, sales users don't need access to marketing information and vice versa. At especially small branch offices such as the one in Utica, New York, GlobalMantic will use a Windows 7 desktop in a pseudo-server capacity. What this means is this Windows 7 desktop will hold some file share capability and will be the print server for the office. From a business need perspective, shared resources reduce overall costs since users don't need their own dedicated devices such as printers. Further, increased collaboration is the lifeblood of a company like GlobalMantic that wants to be on the forefront of their industry. In Windows 7, the Network and Sharing Center holds the basic keys to the resource sharing kingdom. Resource sharing settings are configured on a per network profile basis. Remember, the network profiles by default in Windows 7 are work, home, domain, and public. For each network profile, you configure a number of different items, including network discovery, file and printer sharing, public folder sharing, media streaming, file sharing connections, password protected sharing, and home group connections. If you don't know what any of these things mean, don't worry about it. We're going to go over to a GlobalMantic system right now and take a look at these things. Here we are on a GlobalMantic desktop, and as you can see, we've opened up the Network and Sharing Center already. On the screen, click the Change Advanced Sharing Settings option at the left-hand side of the window. And you'll get a screen like this. If you happen to click the down arrow next to any of the network profiles, you get the same list of information you see under the default or current profile that we're looking at, which is our domain profile. And we're going to walk through each of these items step by step. The first item is Network Discovery, which you can either turn on or turn off. When it's enabled, this computer is able to see other network computers and devices, and it's also visible to other network computers. If you're on a secure network, this is okay to turn on. It makes it easier to identify resources on the network to be able to use for sharing. When file and printing services are turned on, any files and printers that you've shared on the computer can be accessed by other people on the network. If you aren't planning on doing any file or printer sharing from this desktop, consider turning off file and printer sharing for the machine. Likewise, when public folder sharing is on, people on the network, including those that are members of the home groups, can access files in the public folders. And by public, it means public. Anybody on the network that's a part of your network can actually access these public folders. So be careful about what you store in public folders if you decide to use this option. When you enable media streaming, the people and devices on the network can access pictures, music, and videos that happen to be stored on this computer. Additionally, this computer is able to find these same resources out on other computers on the network. So if you enable media streaming, you can watch movies, store music, and store pictures on the network. As a business environment, GlobalMantic doesn't do very much of this, so we're going to keep that option at the default, which is off. For file sharing connections, Windows 7 uses 128-bit encryption to make sure that these file connections stay secure. Not all devices support 128-bit encryption, and then you have to use either 40 or 56-bit encryption. This is true for older versions of Windows, some media devices, and some older computers out on the network. If you have this situation, you can choose the Enable File Sharing for devices that use 40 or 56-bit encryption option instead of the Use 128-bit encryption option. However, doing so will reduce the level of security that you have in your environment. You'll notice that there are similar options for all of the different profiles. However, for the home profile, there's an additional item called Home Group Connections. When it's enabled, you will allow Windows to manage home group connections. Otherwise, you have to use user accounts and passwords to connect to other computers. Before Home Group came around with Windows 7, in order to share services on home computers, you had to synchronize accounts across the computers or create user accounts on all of the computers. With Home Group, Windows can take all the pain out of all this resource sharing, but it's only available for home-type connections, which is why it's only available under Home or Work. There are two kinds of sharing available in Windows 7. With basic sharing, you have three rights that are available. You have owner, read, and read write. The owner is assigned to the user account that set up the initial share for the folder. Read allows the specified user or group to simply read files from the shared location. They're not allowed to modify any files or add new files or delete files. When people have read-write permissions, they're allowed to read files, modify existing files, and create new files. Advanced sharing has similar permissions, except they're called different things. Full control is assigned to the user account that set up the share. The user that has the full control right is allowed to change the resource share permissions. So if they've set up a share for a sales folder, or if you've assigned someone full control to a sales folder, the people who have that right are allowed to make any permission changes that they want. Read writes, again, allow the specified user or group to read files from the shared location, and change writes allow the specified user to read files, modify existing files, and create new ones. This is equivalent to the read-write right from basic sharing. We're going to look at sharing permissions in just a few minutes when we go over to an example on a Global Mantix desktop PC. However, we've talked about NTFS permissions elsewhere in this course. Share permissions are applied only when a resource is accessed over the network. If a resource is accessed from the local console, share permissions don't come into play at all. In that case, only NTFS permissions are enforced. NTFS permissions are applied regardless of the access location, whether it's local or whether it's remote. So if you access a resource over the network, both share and NTFS permissions come into play. Now, we've talked about NTFS permissions fully in the lesson Configuring File and Folder Access. When you combine share and NTFS permissions, the most restrictive set of permissions applies. So if you've accessed a share that has full control, but the NTFS permissions only allow you to have read privileges, you will only have read privileges to the files in that share. On the other side of that coin, if you've connected to a resource for which you only have read share permissions, but you have full control on the NTFS side, you still only have read access to the files and folders inside that share, because you have the most restrictive set of permissions is applying, which in that case would be the share permissions. I can tell you right up front that the most common problems people have with permissions come into play when you start mixing share and NTFS permissions. So keep it straight in your head, because it's very confusing at times, that the most restrictive sets of permissions applies when you're talking about the difference between share and NTFS permissions. In the Managing Mobility Options lesson in this course, we've talked about using offline folder caching to help users on the mobility side of the equation take their work with them on the road. During the folder sharing process, you have to decide how or if you want users to be able to cache offline files and programs to their local computers. And you have some options for how to handle this. One, you can say only the files and programs that users specifically specify are available offline. That is, they have to go to a file or folder and actually say, I want to make this file available offline. You can also tell the users that no files or programs from the shared folder are available offline. In this case, the users can't take their work with them. Or you can say that all files and programs that users open at all from the shared folder are automatically available offline. If you choose this option, a user doesn't have to actually go to the folder and say, make this file available offline. But what they do have to do is actually open the document or program. So once they've opened the document or program, then the system will automatically synchronize that document or program with their local machine. So offline folders is sort of enabled behind the scenes, and the user doesn't have to do anything proactive to make that accessed file or folder accessible offline. GlobalMantix maintains a small office in Utica, New York, at which a Windows 7 desktop is going to act in a pseudo server capacity, and on which we're going to create a couple of shares for the marketing and sales groups at GlobalMantix. There are a couple of different ways to go about sharing folders in Windows 7. One is to use the GUI-based tools that are available in the operating system, and the second one is to use a command line. And we're going to use both methods in this lesson. For the marketing group, we're going to use the GUI method, and we're going to create a marketing shared folder for which offline files will be disabled. Further, we're going to make sure that the marketing group has change rights to the folder, but no more than 5 people at any one time are going to be allowed to access this folder. For the sales group, we'll create a sales shared folder using the command line method. And we're going to enable offline files for both documents and programs using this method. For this folder, the sales group will have change rights to the folder, and the accounting group will have read rights so they can read the quarterly sales figures. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the command that we're going to use to actually create the shared folder for sales. The net share command is a command line tool that's been around in Windows for a pretty long time. And what this command basically says is we're going to use net share, and we're going to create a share called sales using the c:\sales folder, which I've already created. For this share, we're going to grant the domain group called sales change rights and the GlobalMantix domain group called accounting read rights. And we're going to enable offline files for programs. By specifying programs as the offline files type, it encompasses files, folders, and programs. So without further ado, let's go over to a Windows 7 desktop and go about creating these two shared folders. Here we are at a GlobalMantix desktop, and I've already opened up the computer object to the local C drive where you see we've got a marketing folder. Here's the marketing folder, and to share this folder I need to right click it and choose the properties option from the shortcut menu. Next, I'll go to the sharing tab on the marketing properties page, and you're going to see that there's two ways I can share. One is to click the share button, and the second is to use the advanced sharing button. If I click share, that gives me a very basic file sharing dialog box that doesn't achieve all of our goals. From the basic sharing dialog box, I can't limit the number of users that can access the share, nor can I change the offline files configuration. So I'm going to cancel out of this one, and I'm going to click the advanced sharing button. I'm going to choose share this folder, and I want my share name to be marketing. I'm going to change the number of simultaneous users to 5 so that no more than 5 people can access this share. And I want to make sure that only the marketing people can access this shared folder. You'll notice right now everyone, that means anyone that logs into the domain, can actually read the contents of the share. So I'll click remove. Next I'll click add, and I'm going to add the marketing group from the GlobalMantix domain. Now, so I'll check the name, and it's good, and click OK. The marketing people should get change and read rights to this folder and apply. And you can see that the marketing people do indeed have change and read rights. Next, I need to click the caching button and choose my option. In this case, I want to choose no files or programs from the shared folder are available offline. And click OK. And once again, I'll click Apply. And now, this folder has been shared out on the network. In fact, if I access this machine over the network, you'll see that marketing is available as a share on the network. I, however, cannot access it. And why is that? The reason is because although I have full rights via my NTFS permissions on that folder, only members of the marketing group were specifically allowed to have access to the shared folder. Now, that's a good thing because what this did, I'm a domain admin. I'm not allowed to access this folder because my share permissions don't allow me to do it. Only the marketing people can access the shared folder because of the permissions that we set on the shared folder. So, it looks like an error message or a mistake, but it was actually by design. I wanted you to see that although I have full rights on the NTFS side, because I don't have any rights on the share side, I cannot access this shared folder. But I can still access it locally. Notice that this says Network GM7075 Marketing. If I come over here, I'm on the local computer, and I can still access this shared folder. So going at it over the network results in an error because of the share permissions, but going at it locally is allowed because of my NTFS rights. So this also proves out what I told you before, which is about the least restrictive permissions. The most restrictive permissions are the ones that are enforced when you're accessing a resource over the network. Now the next thing that I want to do is I'd like to go to an elevated command prompt. So I'll right-click Command Prompt and choose Run as Administrator. I'm going to create a shared folder for the sales group. I've copied the command here so I didn't forget it. So we're going to share a sales folder as we talked about before. And I'll click Enter. I've got a bad character in here. There we go. Now, sales was shared successfully. So if I go to my C drive and right-click it and choose Properties and go to the Sharing folder, the Sharing tab, you'll see that the Share This Folder option is selected. For permissions, Sales has Change and Read. Accounting has Read, which is exactly what we wanted to do. And for caching, we have all files and programs that users open from the shared folder are automatically available offline. So with that one pretty simple command, we were able to achieve all of our goals by basically hitting the Enter key. Only second behind accessing files and folders on a server, printers are the next most commonly shared devices on a network. By sharing printers, multiple users can share relatively expensive resources and save GlobalMantics a lot of money. Giving every single user their own little desktop printer would be silly on a number of levels. It would increase workload for the IT staff tremendously because they would have to support all of these little printers, which can be a real pain in the neck, by the way. Second, smaller printers like that are tremendously expensive to operate, especially when compared with their larger brethren that may have more features such as duplex, stapling, and a lot of other features. High volume, high capacity printers have very low print costs, and GlobalMantics wants to make sure that they take advantage of these economies of scale wherever they can. When it comes to printing, there are 3 permissions you need to keep in mind. The print permission allows users to manage just their own documents as they're sent to the printer, and it also allows them to print to the printer. Now remember, they're only allowed to manage their own documents. They're not, if other people have printed to that printer, they can't manage the documents for those other people, only their own. Next is the Manage This Printer permission. Users that are assigned to this role can manage the printer itself, including pausing and restarting printing, changing printer permissions, and sharing the printer with other users. People who have been assigned to the Manage Documents role are allowed to manage any print job that users have sent to the print queue. So if there's 10 people that have printed to the printer, people who have been assigned managed documents can manage print jobs for any of those 10 people. So don't make them mad. For Global Mantic, the Utica, New York-based office has an HP LaserJet 4250 printer that they've connected directly to the same Windows 7 machine on which they're doing so many file shares. You've been asked to share this printer with the sales, marketing, and accounting domain groups so that they can all print to the printer. The person named Fred, however, will have the ability to manage the printer as well as all of the documents sent to the printer. Therefore, Fred should be assigned both the Manage This Printer and Manage Documents rights for the printer. So, we're going to go back over to a Global Mantic desktop right now, and we're going to create and share this printer, because the printer has not quite been yet created on the machine either. It's only been physically connected. Here we are, once again, at good old GM7075. So I'm going to go to the Start menu, and I'm going to choose Devices and Printers. Under Printers and Faxes, I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to choose Add a Printer. I'm going to choose to add a local printer connected to the LPT1 printer port for this HP LaserJet 4250. I'm going to choose to install an HP LaserJet 4250. Where is it? PCL 6. I'm going to choose to use the driver that's already installed. If you already have a driver installed, use it if you want to. Otherwise, you can replace the current driver if you have a newer one. And I'm going to call this Utica 4250. That's going to be the name of the printer. Now, I get the option right here as I'm adding the printer to share the printer. So sure, I'm going to share the printer. It's going to be located in Utica, New York. And it's going to be an HP LaserJet 4250 printer at Utica. So the share name is Utica 4250. Actually, I don't like to have spaces in share names, so it's one of my eccentric qualities, I guess. I don't know. Utica 4250, and I'll click Next. And do I want to set this as the default printer? Yeah, for this computer, I will set it as the default printer because it's directly connected. And as you can see, we now have a printer called Utica 4250. Well, I want to make some permission changes to this printer. So I'm going to right-click it. I'm going to choose Printer Properties. And as you'll see on the screen here, there's a Security tab on the Properties page. And right now, everyone is allowed to print to the printer. I don't want that, so I'm going to choose everyone and remove them from the list. Next, I'm going to add Fred. Fred is a user that I have already created on the domain controller, so Fred Rogers is available at fred@globalmantic.com. And he is going to get print, manage this printer, and manage documents permissions for this printer. Now I'm going to add accounting, marketing, and sales. And they're just going to get print rights. And there we go. And that's all there is to it. Now, when I access Global Mantic over the network, we may see this printer. Yep, accessing Global Mantic over the network shows you the sales share, the marketing share, and the printer. If I wanted to, I would just simply right-click the printer and choose Connect from any other machine on the network by just visiting //GM7075 or browsing to it using the Network Neighborhood tool. A new feature in Windows 7 is called Libraries. These are basically virtual folders that encompass a number of other folders from all over the place. With a library, you can create a collection of folders from various sources. You can collect folders from the local machine, from network servers, or from machines that are part of a home group. Windows 7 does ship with some default libraries: documents, music, pictures, and video. Those current libraries, however, can be extended based on your needs. So if you have other folders you want to include in your documents folder, you can add those to the documents folder without any risk. The nice part about it is the location of the folders doesn't change. If you have a folder that's sitting 16 levels deep somewhere on your hard drive and you add it to the documents folder, all it does is basically virtualize that folder and basically make a link to it in the documents folder. So the existing libraries can be extended pretty easily to include new folder sources. In fact, the Utica Sales Manager, Fred, wants the contents of the newly created sales shared folder to appear in his documents library. It is his machine that's acting as the pseudo server at Utica. Further, once this is done, he wants to create another dedicated sales library that includes everything sales related. So for the sales folder, he wants to add that to this documents library, but he wants to also create a sales library that includes all the sales folders on his machine. So we're going to go over to the GlobalMantic desktop right now, and we're going to accomplish these two goals. Once again, we're at GM7075, and I'm going to add that sales folder that we created to the documents library. So I'll go to the Start menu and go to Computer. And I'll open the C drive, and I'm going to right-click the sales folder, and I'm going to choose the Include in Library option, and I'm going to add it to the documents library. Now if I open the sales folder, you'll see that there are actually some documents here. Now if I open up another window, and I open up the documents folder, or the documents library, you're going to see that the My Documents folder is included in this library. The Public Documents folder is included in this library, but it's empty. And the Sales folder is now included in this library as well. So this is a really good way that you can organize files very, very easily. Now that's one way you can add folders to an existing library. The other way you can do it is to right-click the library and choose Properties. And then once you're up at the Properties page, you can decide which folders you'd like to add. If you want to add another location, you can choose Include a Folder. And this is a folder inside Accounting. If you wanted to, you could add it to the Documents folder. But there's all kinds of ways you can add documents and add folders to an existing document library. You can also create new libraries, and we're going to do that right now. To do so, I'll right-click Libraries, and I'll choose New Library. And you can see that a little icon appeared over at the left-hand side of the screen. I'm going to call this Sales. Now I'll right-click this library and choose its Properties page. And I'm going to organize this library for documents. The reason that's important is that's how the visual aspect of the library will manifest itself. And I'll show you that in just a second. I'm going to add a couple of folders to this library. I'm going to add FY 2008 Sales. Oops. So I'll choose Include Folder. And then I'll choose Include Folder again. And I'll choose Sales. For this one, however, I want documents that I save to the library to go to the Sales folder, not to the FY 2008 Sales folder. So I'm going to choose the Sales folder and choose Set Save Location. And that will make sure that when I save something directly to the library, it's saved to the Sales folder and not the FY 2008 Sales folder by mistake. When you open up one of these other libraries, you're going to see that there are videos inside this library, and they're shown as videos. If you go to Pictures, you'll see that there are picture folders, and they're shown as pictures. If I open up the Properties page for the Pictures library, you're going to see that I'm optimizing the library for pictures. If I chose Documents, it would change the look and feel of the Pictures library. But when I go back and choose Pictures again, it organizes them a little bit more visually, which is what you really want for a picture library. So that's what the difference is when you're choosing how you're going to organize the folders. And the final topic in this lesson is the discussion of the Home Group feature in Windows 7 that's intended to facilitate resource sharing in small home networks. Resources shared with home group machines can be provided with some security. So basically, when you create a home group, you have a password that's assigned that the machines that join the home group have to use. The first Windows 7 machine on the home network is asked to create a home group. The home network is the important part. A work and domain computer can join a home group, but they cannot create one. So if you have a machine that's a domain computer and you're sitting at the Global Mantic office, you can't create a home group. If, however, you take that computer home, you can create a home group with it. And we're going to do that in just a minute. After the first machine is added to the network, subsequent machines are asked if they'd like to join the existing home group. Now, although Global Mantic is not going to use the home group feature, the help desk is continually receiving calls from users seeking advice about this feature. So in order to be a good citizen at the Global Mantic community, you've decided you're going to help these users set up their home groups and make sure that they understand the ins and outs of home groups. Because GM7075, the machine we've been using throughout this lesson, is a domain machine on a domain network, it cannot create a home group. It can, however, join a home group. My local machine, however, can create a home group, so that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go to the Start menu and go to Control Panel. In Control Panel, I'll go to the Home Group option, and I'm going to choose to create a home group. The first page of the Home Group Wizard says, what do you want to share with other computers running Windows 7? Well, I'll share everything: pictures, music, videos, printers, and documents. And I'll click Next. Then you have this convoluted password. But don't worry, you can change that. If you don't want to change it, make sure you write down this password because you're going to need it when you want to join other computers to the home group. And then I'll click Finish. Next, I'm going to go back to the Control Panel. And I'm going to choose to change the password. And I'll change the password and type a new password that I can remember a little bit easier. And click Next. I wouldn't recommend you actually make passwords your password. This is for demonstration purposes only. And now I'll click Finish. And now I've got a home group that's created. Let me show you just some of the other options really quick while we're here. One of the options is to stream your pictures, music, and video to all devices on your home network. And you can show the devices that are on your home network, and you can name your media library and a number of other things. You can choose what ratings, parental ratings, and star ratings you want to stream. And you can also see what is actually going on with other devices on your network, media programs on this PC in remote locations. And that's all there is to creating a home group. In this lesson, we started out by talking about resource sharing from a relatively high level. Next, we talked about the differences between basic and advanced sharing in Windows 7, and the differences between share and NTFS permissions, and what happens when the two permission sets come together. Remember, the most restrictive permission set is what takes hold. Then we moved on to offline folder caching. Then we talked about sharing printers and talked about who's allowed to manage print queues in Windows 7. Next, we talked about the new Windows 7 libraries features, and we ended up with a discussion about home group. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.